A lot of alleluias in there, I think. With all this talk of kind of new messiahs and a papal Pete Buckingham, which is a new one for those who know him, I thought I just want to ask one question before we open it up to the audience, and it really comes from the analog Satan, which I think is in all of us in this kind of scenario. And it comes down to this, the current system that we have. We know we're being screwed. We understand all that as independent filmmakers. But it's a process. It's a process that I understand. You can work it through. But what you seem to be offering at the moment, or a lot of the visions being offered at the moment, seem to me pretty difficult to engage with right now. I don't know what the value really is. In the media sphere, don't I get screwed the same as I do here? Only I don't know who's doing it. And there's no great principle involved here. Also, we talk about business model. We're talking about business models here, aren't we? We're talking about a whole lot of different models, which makes for a very fragmented kind of future as far as I see it. So maybe we could start with you, David and Joe. What would make me, as an independent filmmaker, feel I should be jumping right now?
You know, I want to change that question a little bit, because it's not about. Well,
hold on, let me find out what you're going to change that to first.
No. Your question is, what makes an independent filmmaker jump in, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so how many independent filmmakers are in the audience right now? All right, and you put your hands down, and how many distributors are in the audience? Okay, here's the point. It's not about us needing to convince them to jump in, right? It's when the day comes that the same people that raise their hands as a filmmaker raises their hands and are empowered as a distributor, they're going to jump in and tell us what we need to do in order to satisfy what their needs are.
When might that be?
It's happening now. It's happening with the people who are raising their hands now, right? And it's just going to continue. It's going to continue to build. We're in that transitional period. I would say within the next, a year ago, and if I was at the conference we were at a year ago, right? Well, a lot less. We had Aaron and Susan and Lance and Tiffany here who were raising their hands as filmmakers. And today we have, maybe 10 other filmmakers that are raising their hands. This is, as everyone on this panel and everybody that's here at the conference starts to talk about these things, you're going to find more and more independent filmmakers that are empowered, that realize they have the power to just do and stop asking for permission. And they're the ones that are going to generate what tomorrow looks like and when tomorrow comes. So you guys tell us, when's it going to happen?
Well, I think also your point about it being so fractured is really the big problem. It's all the confusion surrounding it. It's very much like the festival landscape was when we started. And I feel like it is moving very fast now, much faster. It's accelerating. So it'll come quicker than these last few years would make us believe maybe that it will come. But also part of it is just organizing it. We've just completed a proof of concept on this digital dashboard, and we'll be rolling it out in the spring, where it will put these distribution alternatives side by side for filmmakers so that they can come in and kind of park themselves, and then there would be essentially a forum surrounding all of these options. So you'll be able to opt in, very simply compare the benefits side by side in a very linear form, item for item, for your digital distribution options, or your mobile options, or theatrical options, where you might see emerging pictures next to certain other options. So it's a place where the outlets can meet the filmmakers and kind of create that handshake in a way that it happens with festivals right now.
So you're the box, in fact.
Well, we're hoping that it's more generated from the outside, and we're just the plug-in.
Okay, fair enough. Kelly, do you see advantages in early adoption and getting involved at this stage, or is it something where independent filmmakers can happily watch the evolution and jump in when they feel comfortable?
Well, I think that's it's always difficult to tell when you're in that flux moment. I think right now what you'll find is that filmmakers who are already showmen, if you will, filmmakers who already are a bit entrepreneurial are going to be the ones to lead the way. And I think what's going to be interesting, though, will be, speaking of toolkits, if then there is some more, if traditional distribution eventually gets turned inside out, and instead of distributors being people who buy a film and take it away from a filmmaker and create a market for it, if instead they start offering their services and they don't own the films for those filmmakers who are not showmen, for those filmmakers who are not so interested in the marketing. And I think that's a way for the traditional skill sets that we see employed in traditional distributors to kind of turn themselves inside out and stop trying to be owners of content and start being providers of services, because not everyone can do it. I know lots of amazing filmmakers who can barely mumble their name.
They're all of our readers, actually. Paula, what the point I was trying to get to, I think you've all actually got to it before me, but the point I was trying to get to was, if you don't engage in this world now, if you let this thing develop, aren't you putting yourself in a position where you're in a world which has been, which is still within the confines set by studios and big players? Is there an advantage in or should you now be working on distribution at this stage before the world's kind of set out by bigger players?
Do I think people should be experimenting in this space? Absolutely. But then I think that I would pick up the term entrepreneur. I think the transitional space always rewards the entrepreneur. So, chaos and confusion always rewards the entrepreneur, the person who's prepared to take a step outside and do something new and do something different. I think we only need to look at the film industry and the big studios, and if you go back to early last century and sort of see, the names that we now consider to be the, I can't get further away from it.
Stand at the back, you might.
I'm wondering if it's picking up. But the early days of the studios were all about who was prepared to go that extra step, who was prepared to take that risk, and the same names that we now consider to be the sort of the enemy were at one point the ones that were absolutely the cutting edge, the rebels, the people that were doing things a little bit new and a little bit different. So yes, I do think people should be experimenting in that place. But I think, sort of more pragmatically, you have to weigh up where you think your best opportunities are going to be. I think new filmmakers now look at the statistics as to how likely it is that they are going to get a film made, and more importantly, how likely it is that they're going to get their film seen. And for them, the weighing up of, am I going to go the traditional route or am I going to go down and try something a little bit riskier? It doesn't look so risky if it means that somebody is going to see their film. And so I think, for those of you who are more established filmmakers, it is about weighing up those risks and trying to understand where the opportunities are. I would certainly advocate, however, at the very least, paying attention to this new distribution space. And if you have an opportunity, experiment. And you can. You can use it as a marketing tool that does not give necessarily the baby away with the bathwater.
I agree. I think you said most of what I would say, but
Sorry.
I think, should you get involved now? Do you have content? Is it sitting there with no eyeballs on it? Then yes, I think it's that easy to say you should be involved. What is the point of having content, of making films, if nobody's going to see them? So,
Are you the rebel? Is YouTube the rebel turned mainstream very quickly? Because you seem to offer a point of distribution with already a very clear audience.
I'm sorry, say that.
Sorry, I was being waved out there. Is YouTube? Does YouTube see itself as the rebel organisation that now becomes mainstream, becomes the key way
Sure.
for filmmaking?
I think in essence YouTube is a platform, and so it's not a media company, it is a platform for other people to use, and so I think we very much hope that filmmakers across the board will make use of it, whether they are putting out a mainstream product, whether they're putting out something really niche oriented. Those audiences are on the site and can be found, and I do think that it is a fragmented sort of situation. Again, Four-Eyed Monsters, you have a DVD, you have digital distribution, you have theatrical. These things can work together, and yes, it's sort of confusing to figure out how that happens, but it can be done, and that's the challenge of being part of something new and evolving, I think.
We'll take some questions.
The internet, like for everybody else, has dramatically changed the lives of disabled people, because we've got once you can get something digitally, you can adapt it. So if you're blind or deaf or different kind of mobility impairments or learning disabled in whatever way, you can get interfaces that enable you to participate and access and create content. So my question is, what are you guys like? YouTube, Without a Box, whatever. Various other people thinking about digital distribution.
I would say that it's the community on YouTube that does things for one another and provides services to one another. One of our filmmakers recently, M. Strange again, had his film translated by users into like 14 different languages with closed captioning that they all chose to do as volunteers because they're fans of his and they're friends of his at this point. I think similarly, it would be very easy to find audience members who would be happy to dub your videos in foreign languages. I think when you have a community that's so willing to participate and engage with one another, it actually makes accessibility really feasible.
Are you doing the same with Without a Box?
I would use Facebook as a great example, just in terms of the API that they've released. I think that probably you'll see something come out on Facebook that's created by the disabled community that will make it easier to use Facebook. And Without a Box would certainly like to go in the same direction in terms of creating an open source platform where we're not the only innovators on it, but the entire community can innovate on the same platform.
Okay, let's take a question here.
Yeah, I'm really into this. I'd call myself an internet filmmaker, actually. My name's Tim Clegg. My question's about gatekeepers again. I'm just wondering, over the last year or so, if we're not just shifting that. So we talked about gatekeepers in the past being distributors and so on, but certainly when I'm trying to promote my feature film that I'm trying to get off the ground, for instance, I found when I managed to convince the guys at iFilm to feature that on their front page for a week, that increased the number of viewers by 10 times. So really, that guy that made that decision at iFilm, he's a gatekeeper. So in essence, maybe the most exciting times were perhaps the last 2 years as big business come in, and now they're just putting in their own gatekeepers because, if Fox owns MySpace and something, is the glory days behind us
What's the
already.
question, Tim? Is that
My question is, do you guys see yourselves as the new gatekeepers, or are you worried about other people being that within a year or two?
Can I address that real quick?
Yeah,
because it's in a way it's also connected to the question that was just asked. You're putting your own walls in front of you, and you're looking at things, and you're creating gatekeepers where you don't need to. So for the question that was asked prior to yours, you could reach out to disabled communities that are offline and aggregate them and bring them online into a community and then start to market them. To your question, you're going to hear more from Aaron and Susan and from Lance, but here are filmmakers who created their audience not by asking somebody at MySpace or somebody at Google to put their film on the front page, but by going out and marketing and finding the niches, the niche places to bring their audience to them. Maybe it's at a film festival and they aggregate their audience into their MySpace page or to their Without a Box page or wherever. And then because of the popularity, a company that has a broader reach then sees it and puts it on their front page. So flip it around and realize that you're in control over that.
It's a really interesting question, and one I think this afternoon's sessions will actually touch on a great deal. People who are getting around it. We've got one last question just here.
I think Peter Buckingham before said that we don't have experience now of business models, so that people, they try to get financing and try to project their earnings. But the wonderful thing that's happening, that we're seeing, is that you don't need to sell a lot of DVD copies to make a profit, because if you go self-distribution, and you're making somewhere between $10 to $15, sometimes $20 or even pounds per DVD if people are buying it through your website, then you only have to sell 1/5 of the amount that you would have done if you did a retail distribution deal to get the same amount of profit. So for example, the guy who did this amazing documentary about the Van Nuys Airport, about glider planes, people would say, what the hell are you making a film about that? But there are hundreds of thousands of pilots out there and people, and they bought this film because the network, the social community, let people know about it. And to sell 10,000 copies, you can do the maths. You can just make quite a bit of money if you're making $10, $20 per film. And in the education, I mean, you might be able to speak about this, but I know that people are releasing educational versions. So instead of charging $19.99, $24.99, they're selling them for anywhere from $50 to $250 each. I mean, maybe you could speak about that, but nobody's really been speaking about dollars and cents, pounds and pence. We're talking about theory. But I think that's the realistic thing, is that you actually can make 10 to 20 without a middleman, and that if you can do hybrid distribution, use the whole range, but mostly channel it through your own. If you could speak about
Let's
what
let
you're saying.
Kelly start that.
No, that was very much a part of when we made our negotiations with Amazon, which is all non-exclusive, because we wanted to accommodate people also distributing things on their own, that we wanted to crack open their terms and their royalty return on DVDs, which for consumer pricing is around 40%, but in the US, a traditional educational price is $300 to sit on a library shelf. We cracked open their royalty return so that actually the more expensive your title is, the greater your percentage return is for royalty. And unlike selling on a consumer self-distribution, where someone's just sending you a check or someone is going through PayPal for a credit card, most universities do insist that you have a corporate PO system set up, and so Amazon facilitates that. That's something that's generally beyond, an individual selling those kinds of things. So, for that $300 price, through our program, you would get a return of approximately 79% back on that royalty on each DVD that was sold.
Yeah, Paula, isn't one of the reasons why people aren't talking enough about this is that actually the figures, it's much more it's much easier in a way, with all due respect, to talk in grand terms and to talk about actual pounds and shillings. Well, I could show my age there, aren't I? That's it. I haven't bought a drink for a long time. Pounds and shillings on the ground.
Yeah, I think it's absolutely right. I mean, we have heard a couple of times already today that finding the case studies is really quite difficult, and frankly that's why this afternoon is so exciting, because actually we're going to have some real live filmmakers talking about real life case studies, and starting to sort of really get a sense of how that plays out. I mean, as filmmakers, though, you do have the advantage of the music industry having gone through this, and there's a lot to be learnt from their experiences at the business model, in the business model sense of it. I mean, I would point to, some of the experiences, such as those by a guy called John Buckman, who runs a website called Magnitunes. He's been running this now for, it must be 5 years. It's very much in the music space, but John recognised very, very quickly that you could rethink the record industry, and he sort of turned it upside down. And he has, a stable of artists, just like a record company. They all release their music under a CC license, which means that it can get spread around and shared. And so he doesn't make money, nor do his artists make a great deal of money out of that particular part of the sort of the process. But what he recognised was that was a small part of the process. And so all of his artists sell CDs and do very well out of that. But actually, the big money spinner for all of his artists and for Magnitunes is actually in compositional commissioning. And so all of his artists are regularly commissioned, or their music used by people like yourselves in films. And so he has sort of really created a tiered level that returns and exploits the entire spectrum of what a musician can do in the sort of the industry model. And that's worked really well. So, again, we can start to have a look at what is the whole spectrum of exploitation that you can do in the filmmaking process, and then try and figure out how do you exploit that whole thing. So we talked about, set visits. That's a really good example of an area that you can exploit.
Okay, I'm afraid I'm going to have to call an end to this session now. Hopefully there'll be some people over lunch. I've got a groat to spend on my lunch, and I know they'll be available for conversation. I think all I will leave you with is just the thought that having sort of a lot of distribution panels with traditional media, one of the things that I think really is noticeable about the new distributors is the level of passion and excitement and enthusiasm, which I'm sure is going to play a big role in the future. So thanks very much to the panel.
Hey, thank you very much.